Welcome to DIYeasycrafts. Today we're going to take a look at how to winterize a Yamaha 150 horsepower 4-stroke outboard. Now what we're going to do here to winterize this engine, you can use basically the same techniques on almost any 4-stroke. There's 4 steps. We're going to stabilize the fuel, change the gearcase oil, change the oil and filter, and then fog the engine. And this is everything you need. You're going to need fuel stabilizer. You're going to need gearcase oil, Yamaha lube, gearcase lube, SAE 80W-90, a hand pump for that lube, an oil pan, and compressor washers for the plugs. For the oil change, you're going to need engine muffs to warm it up, Yamaha lube 10W30 oil, a dipstick pump, a funnel, oil filter, and filter wrench. And for the fogging, you're going to need the Yamaha lube EFI fogging oil, a 2-gallon gas tank, a fuel line with a bulb primer, and a wire tie. So the fuel stabilization is very easy. Buy almost any fuel stabilizer down at your local marine store, and you can just read the instructions and add that directly to your fuel tank, depending on the number of gallons that you have in the tank. That will circulate when we start the engine to warm it up in a little bit. For boats that run in the salt water like mine, I like to flush it out with the standard hose connection that's on the port side of the engine. Now notice I put a quick disconnect on mine, just makes it a little easier, but basically you just hook it up to a garden hose and flush out the engine. Do not run the engine when flushing it out with the garden hose like this. This is just to get out some of the salt water. Because this boat is going to be stored in very cold temperatures, I also want to put that hose downward and let it drain completely. I don't want any water stuck in that hose that would freeze and possibly do damage. If the boat only runs in fresh water, you could skip that entire first step. Next, we're going to put engine muffs on the intakes. Make sure they're positioned correctly. Turn on the garden hose again so that the engine's getting plenty of water. And now it's time to start up the engine and warm it up. What we're trying to do here is warm up the engine so that the oil change is going to be a little bit easier. So you really want to warm it up at idle for 5 minutes or so is plenty. Of course, make sure that water is coming out. What we're going to do first is the gearcase oil on the lower unit. So you're going to need a flat head screwdriver. You're going to need a hand pump with a fitting. That's going to actually screw right into the lower plug, which is located right underneath. You almost have to be under the engine looking up at it. You're going to put an oil pan underneath the engine, and there's actually 2 plugs. You're going to take out the bottom plug first, and you might get a couple of drips of oil when you take that out, not a lot. And then you're going to have to take out another plug a little bit higher. That will break the airlock and allow the gearcase oil to flow out. Keep these plugs in order because they are slightly different. This is the upper plug. Again, a large size flathead screwdriver does a nice job. And as soon as you remove that one, the airlock gets broken and the oil will start to flow. Now you could actually just let this drain and move on to the oil change. But for this video, we're just going to do everything kind of in order. So while this gearcase oil is draining, change the compression washers on each one of those plugs. And you can pick these up again at your local marine store. This is the hand pump. It has a fitting that screws right into that lower plug location. What I like to do is screw it in prior to screwing it onto the actual bottle of gearcase oil. It just makes it a little bit easier. Once it's screwed onto the gearcase oil container, you just have to pump it up. It takes quite a few pumps. And you want to pump it until gearcase oil is flowing nicely out of that upper plug location. and then you're just going to really reverse. So once oil is coming out, that top plug, which you see there, you're going to start by putting the top plug back in. That will create the airlock again. Just snug it up with that flathead. I'm going to take off my hand pump and quickly put in the bottom plug. And that's the first step. The lower gear case oil is changed. Now we're going to move on to changing the oil. Now there's a couple of different ways of draining oil from these engines. We're going to use the easiest. You're going to start by taking off the fill cap, the oil fill cap from the top of the engine, and also remove the dipstick from the starboard side of the engine. The oil pump that we're using is a hand pump, and it comes with a suction straw that will fit directly into that dipstick tube. You want to insert that all the way down until it bottoms out. The other end attaches to the pump. You pump it up 10 times or so and just basically sit back and wait. Now this pump is kind of a good one. You can pump oil out, after warming up the engine, comes out very easy. But with this pump, you could actually pump out the oil even if you didn't warm up the engine. I got out just over a gallon from each engine. It takes a little while. Once you get all the oil out, I'm just going to move this over to the side so it's not so precariously balanced. The other method of draining oil, on the back of some of the engines, the L transom models, there's a plug. And basically you just remove that plug, remove the oil fill cap to break the airlock, and it would just flow out right into an oil pan. On the engines that I have, which are the T transom models, there's a panel on the starboard side. That panel has to be removed with, I think, 6 bolts and 1 screw. And after you remove that panel, then it exposes that drain plug, which is on the side. And again, you would remove that plug, and then remove the cap, and the oil would drain out into a pan. The easier method was with the pump that we used. Now we're going to move on to changing the oil filter. Now you are probably going to need an oil filter wrench in addition to the filter. The filter just unscrews with the oil. Don't forget the oil is already drained out of this engine at this time. So I'm just going to unscrew the old filter. I'm going to take the replacement filter. I'm going to put a little oil and just lubricate that gasket. Screw it right back into position. I did put a rag underneath just to make sure there wasn't any spillage. And you can just snug it up with the filter wrench. I'm going to fill up this engine with Yamaha 10W30 oil. I know basically how much I took out, but just using a funnel, very easy. And then just check the dipstick occasionally until you've got it filled, filled between the markers showing that the engine is full. So even though there's 4 steps to this process of winterizing, they're all pretty simple. So the next step is going to be the fogging oil. We're using a Yamaha EFI engine storage fogging oil. And for these 4-stroke engines, it's pretty simple. I have a dedicated 2-gallon gas tank, and you pour the whole bottle of fogging oil into that, and you shake it up good, mix it around, so that the whole tank has that fogging oil mixed into the gas. You're then going to cut the wire tie on the gas filter. This is the intake side of the gas filter. The gas filter is located on the starboard side of the engine, the starboard front side of the engine. You're just going to pull off that gas line. You'll replace that later with a new wire tie. The primer line has a bulb primer on it with a directional arrow. So you know which end to stick to the gas tank. The directional arrow will point towards the filter. So this is the intake to the filter. You want to then prime it a couple of times, 2 or 3 times from the tank. You'll actually see the fuel moving in the filter. Then you can reattach the muffs at the bottom of the engine. Don't forget to turn on the water and then start up your engine. You're going to want to just idle this for 5 or 10 minutes. So it's actually basically just sucking the fogging oil mixed fuel out of that 2-gallon fuel tank. And you know that the engine's properly fogged once you start to see blue smoke out of the exhaust. And once that's done, you're basically done with the project. Rehook up the original fuel line, put another zip tie on there, close up your engines, and you're all set for the winter. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, I ask that you please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to this YouTube channel, and I'd love to hear some comments in the comments section below. Please check us out on the web at DIYeasycrafts.com. Thank you very much.